Okay, everyone, thank you so much for checking in and welcome back to my channel. I want to talk about a subject that's really touchy with me, and I'm going to do it anyway because when you talk about it, it's healing, and sometimes it helps someone else. My first suicide attempt. I want to discuss it and kind of unpack it, and then listen for your feedback because this is a table talk. We can converse back and forth. But I can remember it's way back. Sometimes it was in 2012. I just got laid off a 10-year job, and I was feeling very, very depressed. And remember when I tell you when we dealing with depression and deep depression is two sets of symptoms. Depression has a set of symptoms, and deep depression carry its own set of symptoms. I think I'll talk about that next, about how the symptoms are different and how you start to identify those when you do your self-assessment. Okay, and I was feeling real lowly, self-loathing, alone. I felt by myself. I felt like no one even was concerned about me or cared. I felt like my partner wasn't supportive. And I just got to the low point where in my mind, and it would definitely be your psychotic frame of thinking, suicide seems like a good idea. Because you would be thinking in your mind, well, nobody's going to miss me. Nobody cares. If I leave here, they wouldn't even know it. So I'm just going to do it. So I had to, through my self-assessment, I had to stop and think about all the things my mind tricked me into believing. It tricked me into believing that no one cared, which was false. My family cared. It tricked me into believing that I was alone. That's false. I was with a lot of supportive people. Even my coworkers are supportive of me. And it would trick me into believing that taking my life would have been a good idea. It would never be a good idea because I would have missed out on a awesome future. I would have missed out on a awesome future of my kids. I wouldn't know how they grew up and what they turned out to be. I would have missed out on what I would have looked like 5 to 10 years into the future. So that's why in order to tap into your frame of thinking at the time, the first thing that come to my mind when I was in that mood and at that stage of life, no one was hearing my pain. No one was stopping to be quiet enough to hear my pain. I always had someone to suggest and, why don't you just cut it out and control yourself? Why don't you just snap out of it? And no one was taking the time to just hear my pain. And by doing that, all you're doing is being a good listener. That's all you're doing is you turn into a good listener so I can get that scary weight off of my shoulders so I can have a balanced mind. Once you get that weight off of your shoulders, you can stop and say, you know what? I do not have to take this choice. I do not have to make these steps. I can choose something else. Getting help right now would be a good idea. Partnering with my clinician would be a good idea. Applying positive antidotes would be a good idea. Maybe I do need an inpatient stay for 7 days until I figure this out. But I know one thing I don't want to do. I don't want to miss out on my future. My future may be, hey, I'm the new alderman of my city, of my town. or I'm the new president coming up, or I'm the new graduate CEO and founder of this brand new billion-dollar company. But I'll never know that if I decide to destroy myself before I figure it out. And that's what I had to stop and do a self-assessment about. I had to stop and say, you know what? I know what the issue is. I won't be in such a hurry to do things because of my psychotic thinking. I think people don't care, so I'm just going to take my life. Oh, I feel like don't nobody miss me, so I'll just go ahead and take my life. No. That's what meditative days for me is so successful. It gives me a chance to stop, slow down, push everything out so I can take a look and examine what's going on in my head. So I look at my head. First thing I think if I look at deep depression and I say deep depression, your symptoms is always suicide ideations or harmful thinking or strategic planning to destroy myself and others. Why is it I always falling into deep depression's hands? You know, because those are the characteristics of mental illness symptoms. First of all, mental illness will never at any point become your friend, your buddy, or your pal. Mental illness is designed to destroy you. It will never be a day where I wake up and say, oh, me and bipolar 1 are BFFs and we just walk down the street hand in hand and we have no troubles. You'll never hear me say that. You know why? Because every day I wake up, bipolar 1 gives me a manic symptom. It gives me a deep depression symptom. It's not my friend, and it makes sure it displays unfriendly symptoms towards me. So I have to be on my P's and Q's, and I have to put my regiments together, and I have to put my components together, and I have to execute. Me executing my positive antidotes is key. I have to do it on a regular basis. I can't rest. Mental illness don't rest. Mental illness don't take a break. Mental illness, matter of fact, they even disturb your dreams. It takes your dreams and your sleep and makes you insomnia, and it makes you psychotic to the point where they want you to think destroying yourself and others is a good idea. But that's why we put in self-assessment, and we do meditative days, we do yoga days, we do riding a bike. We slow ourselves down and we start to review internally. And that gives us good homework. That gives us a lot to think about, because we start to say, hey, I finally has identified what deep depression looks like in my life. I finally identified what hallucinations look like in my life, because now I know how it presents itself to make me irresponsible responses. When we talk about cluster B personality disorder, I'll let you know how my narcissistic behavior and my histrionic behavior rear its ugly head. It always, and I thought for some reason, thinking you're good and you're healthy and thinking you're important and you're all that is good to have, but it's not good to have when you're dealing with mental illness. Mental illness will tackle any part of your thinking and exacerbate it and take it all out of context. And that's why you behave differently. And that's why it's a personality disorder, because then you start your language change, then your behavior change. Then for histrionic, for me, I fight real hard to get an audience. So in order for me to get an audience, I would just do something really drastic, something dangerous, because I need that audience. We'll talk about that going further too. So let's open up the table talk for cluster B personality disorder, because you have 4. You have antisocial personality disorder. You have borderline personality disorder. You have narcissistic personality disorder, and you have histrionic personality disorder. And those 4 braid all together in its own. One time you might see one. The next time you might see 2 of them working hand in hand. The next one you might see 3 of them working hand in hand. And believe it or not, all of those personality disorders show their ugly head in your life at one point or another, and it makes you respond irresponsibly. So that anytime it gets to the point where your output is irresponsible, you don't want to do that, because then you're hurting yourself and others. And I'll give you some examples going forward of some situations that I've been with over the years where I've been very, very close in my hurting myself and others. My narcissistic behavior, I changed my language, and I used to talk to people and I used to tell them, I used to say you and your kind and those. That's how my language used to change when I do for narcissistic. Instead, I work hard at saying we and us and together and connection and team. That's how you speak, because we all work together to make us work. But narcissism, it'll play in your mind, and it'll make you think that you're just holding yourself at a high value. But when you're dealing with mental illness, it's a trick. Some people can probably handle that, but me, myself, as a person with mental illness, I cannot handle that. So I have to be careful. I have to be careful of my language and my behavior, my body gestures. I had a delusion of a person, and I thought that person was making a pass towards me. So I turned around, made a pass towards that particular person, and that person rejected my pass because he never made the pass. So that's what delusions play on you. It play on your minds. And then on top of that, I got depressed because I was rejected. And you see how your symptoms braid itself together? First it starts off as a delusion, and then it marries itself with a deep depression because of the response of the party. And before you know it, now you're sinking inside the house with isolation because you don't want to come out the house because you're embarrassed. So that just took about 3 days of your life away. So you have to be careful. You have to be careful. It's almost like monitoring yourself at all times. So I definitely wanted to speak about that, and I wanted to speak about you choose life. Choose life, because life is worth living. To get to that future, choose life. And we are listening. We're here to listen, not talk, not suggest, not impose on you. We're here to listen. And I love to listen. So until next time, you stay healthy, and we will see you